Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to take a seemingly ordinary, everyday object and transform it into a fascinating historical artifact just by examining its hidden visual clues. You know, we encounter so many things throughout our day that we barely even give a second glance to, right? Especially that loose change jingling at the bottom of our bags or sitting on the dresser. But today, we're going to slow down, we're going to use a detective's lens to decode the incredible story stamped right onto the surface of a single, simple piece of metal.
Think about it. When you flip a coin, you're usually just checking for heads or tails, right? Maybe you're deciding who gets to ride shotgun. But if you actually stop to really read it, to study the contours, the numbers, and those tiny little marks etched into its surface, you realize pretty quickly that you aren't just holding currency. You're actually holding a miniature, mass-produced monument. It is a highly deliberate piece of design, specifically meant to communicate a very specific message to millions of people all at the exact same time.
All right, let's get right into Section 1. A pocket-sized monument.
Notice the distinct visual layers right away. Look at how this €2 piece pops against the organic, textured grain of the wooden surface behind it. It immediately stands out as something highly manufactured. It features this really bright, silver-colored outer ring that seamlessly frames a warm, gold-colored inner core. And that bimetallic structure? Well, it isn't just functional, it acts as a visual framing device. It literally forces your eye to look past the outer border and focus directly on whatever is right there in the center.
Because here's the thing. Every single millimeter of real estate on a coin is incredibly valuable. So everything we see here has absolutely earned its place. We've got that bimetallic composition acting as our frame. Inside the silver ring, there's a continuous loop of 12 five-pointed stars, which is the unmistakable symbol of the European Union, acting as this unyielding boundary. And then, dominating that gold center, we have a portrait, completely surrounded by etched typography and very specific dates. Trust me, none of this is an accident.
Moving along to Section 2. The central figure.
See that name arcing boldly right along the top right edge, Helmut Schmidt? It's explicitly naming the man depicted. Notice how the curve of the text perfectly mimics the curve of the coin itself, almost cradling the portrait. By using such a prominent, unmistakable font, the designers are making absolutely sure there is zero ambiguity here. He is the undeniable focal point of this entire monument.
And wow, this brilliantly illustrates his character. Look really closely at the deeply lined forward-facing portrait, and specifically at that hand gesture resting right at the bottom of the frame. The etching captures just incredible detail. You can see the sweep of his hair, the heavy lines around his mouth and eyes, clearly suggesting a man of significant age, experience, and a pretty serious demeanor. But the truly fascinating part is the hand. The fingers are positioned inward, resting just under his chin. It's a gesture of deep thought, right? It looks like someone right in the middle of making a highly considered important point. It completely elevates the portrait from just a standard headshot to a dynamic, living capture of a personality.
Let's move on to Section 3. Deciphering the dates.
Now, if we scan the surface, we actually find three very specific points in time scattered around the portrait: 1918, 2015, and 2018. It's almost like a timeline has been completely deconstructed and wrapped right around Helmut Schmidt's profile. So, to really understand the story this object is telling us, we need to piece these numerical clues together. What's truly fascinating is how these numbers build a little micro-narrative, contrasting his 97-year lifespan with the specific year of the coin's creation. Over on the right beneath his name, we see 1918 to 2015. So that defines the man's entire life, nearly a century of existence just summarized in a tiny dash between 2 years. But then, hovering just behind his head, we see 2018. That tells us this object is a posthumous tribute, created exactly 3 years after he passed away. That little gap in time completely transforms the coin. It takes it from being a contemporary portrait and turns it into a commemorative act of memory.
Next up is Section 4, Symbols and Secret Marks. Okay, so we have these tiny solitary letters hiding on the surface, and they act kind of like a secret code, providing the final piece of context for where this object came from. A mint mark is essentially the artist's signature, or the factory stamp. It's the origin point. It tells us exactly where this physical object was born, before it eventually ended up resting on a table or jingling around in your pocket. You have to look extremely closely for this. Just above the 2018 date on the left, you'll find a tiny, almost microscopic D. That actually stands for Deutschland, or Germany. Now drag your eyes across the portrait, just below the 1918 to 2015 lifespan, to spot a tiny J. That is the specific mark for the minting facility in Hamburg. So these letters anchor this object to a very real physical geography. And notice how all of these elements are securely encircled by those 12 European stars?
They bind all this totally disparate information together into one cohesive badge. Finally, let's wrap things up with Section 5, History in Your Hands. What started out as just a simple shiny disc sitting on a wooden table has been totally revealed as a highly engineered tribute packed with names, lifespans, and geographic codes. When we first looked at this, it was just an object, right? Now, it's a story. It is a testament to former German Chancellor Helmut Schmidt, a man who lived for 97 years. It's a memorial literally struck in 2018. It's a geographic puzzle born right in Hamburg, and honestly, it is a complete masterclass in visual hierarchy, using the 12 stars of Europe to draw our eyes straight to that deeply thoughtful gesture of the man right at the center.
So, this brings us to the end of our decoding session today. But really, it should just be the beginning of how you look at the world around you. The next time you're emptying your pockets, don't just count the value of the metal. Take a second to read the stories etched right into the surface. What pocket-sized monuments are sitting entirely unnoticed in your wallet right now? Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating microhistory with me on this explainer. Keep observing, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.